1947 primarily because of one of the reasons was leadership. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the leadership went into the hands of a person who was not very much rooted in the soil of India, and that colonial mindset has ruled India.
This is a major shift. Now, how do you, so this is a little more nuanced question that I'm trying to ask you.
Mr. Modi's personality is completely different in many ways from the personalities of the older prime ministers. The Indian people saw in him someone who's a savior. He came as a savior in 2014, and that way he was both a product of the times, and the times are also being shaped by him.
तो ये एक तो इस्लामिक युग में ये जो हम हुआ, उसके बाद उसकी एक तरह से कंटिन्यूटी हुई अंग्रेज़ों के काल में, और उसमें थोड़ा और सोने पे सुहागा जैसे बोलते हैं या नीम करेला चढ़ा कि वो एक सेंस ऑफ शेम भी इन्फ्यूज़ हो गया हमारे अपने कल्चर के प्रति, सिविलाइजेशन के प्रति, वे ऑफ डूइंग थिंग्स एटसेट्रा।
जो मुगल्स थे, they targeted mostly on the Kshatriya group because they saw their rule being threatened by all these Rajasthan kings and princes. The English, they did not see themselves threatened by Kshatriyas. They saw themselves threatened by the Brahmins because the Brahmins were the repository of knowledge. And the British felt that if they have to rule over here, they have to intellectually finish us off. Right. And the intellectual repository was with the Brahmins. So if you see all this talk about destroying Brahmanism, equating Brahmanism with Hinduism, came with the English missionaries who started targeting the Brahmins and the schools. The British destroyed the schools in India, the universities, and they brought their own missionary schools. They brought their own, style of teaching, which took over. Right. So the two targeted different groups of society, but the underlying thing was both was the same. It was to create shame and humiliation so that the society can be ruled and controlled and can never get up on its feet again.
लेकिन इस्लामिक युग में क्षत्रियों को जो भी किया होगा, लेकिन हमारे जो आर्टिजन क्लास है, कारीगर समाज में बहुत बड़ा कन्वर्जन भी तो हुआ है उस समय। मतलब आज के दिन ऐसा कई लोग मानते हैं कि 90% मुसलमान जो है वो कन्वर्टेड हिंदू है, मे बी मोर। बहुत थोड़े से ईरान और ये पश्चिम एशिया से आए हुए लोग हैं, बाकी जो अशराफ और वो लोग हैं, बाकी पसमंदा तो करीब करीब सारा ही हिंदू से कन्वर्ट हुआ है। तो ऑनस्लॉट सिर्फ उधर नहीं था, छोटी तथाकथित जो निम्न वर्ग की जातियां उन पे भी ऑनस्लॉट था और उनको कन्वर्ट किया गया, ये सब था।
मैं पूरी तरह से सहमत हूँ कि दे ट्राइड टू कन्वर्ट एवरीवन and there was no, but I'm talking of the main focus, from whom they experienced the threat was from these two institutions and classes.
तो ये बड़ा ये कि हमको आज़ादी मिली 47 में, लेकिन उसके पहले ये एक शायद प्रोसेस चला है, थोड़ा बहुत मैंने पढ़ा, इससे मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि अंग्रेज़ों को ये कहीं ना कहीं ये लगने लगा था आफ्टर द सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर और ड्यूरिंग दैट टाइम कि अब हमको हिंदुस्तान को तो आज़ादी देनी ही पड़ेगी। उसमें बहुत सारे फैक्टर्स थे, खाली कांग्रेस का रोल नहीं है, नेताजी का भी रोल है, आईएनए का भी रोल है, और भी बहुत सारे इंटरनेशनल इस तरह के।
एक और रोल जो है मैं शेयर करना चाहूँगा अगर आप अनुमति दें, वो ये है कि जो द बिगेस्ट ब्रिटिश फियर was the fear of captivity. जो अगर हम 16th century से लेकर present British times तक देखें, the colonial times, the British, the Europeans and later the British, they were going out in big numbers. They were taken captives in a lot of places. Those captives, they recorded their journals, and the fear of being taken a captive was very deep in the British, and that fear of captivity rose very high during the time in the 40s, when the INA was, coming forward, and secondly, when the soldiers came back from the war, there was a chance of a, revolution, a rebellion taking place. So that fear of captivity got activated and arose exponentially at that time, which is a very close kept British secret. This is what I'm writing about in my coming book, The Island Without a Shore, because the more I studied archival material, the more I found that how much the fear of captivity dominated the British consciousness. They could not face it, and particularly the British had several fears. One was about being converted to Islam, being circumcised. Their women and children being taken captive, which they were taken earlier, and they died, and they never dealt with that. It was a transgenerational trauma for the British that always was at the back. It arose very high during the 1857 revolt, or the War of Independence, as I call it. So that fear of captivity, being taken captive again, always remained. And the British felt that if in 47, if they don't go, there will be a mass rebellion, they will be all taken captives, and that fear was, I think, was yeah, it also played a role, and I think it was the major dominating factor why they left, more than anything else. Right. So that is what I'm writing about in the book.
Also, in the sense that there's a power shift which is happening. Power is shifting from England to America. It's around Second World War, and the American president famously said, I mean, it is recorded to the British ambassador that when you give independence to India as your business. This is 42 when Roosevelt says this. But make sure that India stays in the Western orbit.
Or
Right.
world, yes.
So then the question which I am asking you is that we became independent in 47. This collective trauma of 1,000 years or 800 years, 900 years, something should have been done after that.
Yes, nothing was done.
Why do you think nothing was done? And what do you see, if any change is happening now? How do you see that transition happening? What has happened? Why, first my question is, why did nothing happen after 47?
Nothing happened after 47, primarily because one of the reasons was leadership. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the leadership went into the hands of a person who was not very much rooted in the soil of India. So he was a very westernized person whose mindset was extremely Western and English, and who did not feel the need for transformation, that he did not understand Indian history in terms of the trauma that the Indians had gone through. If you read the discovery of India, it would seem like a narration of events, something like as if a football match is going on. It doesn't sound like a rootedness in the country and also the trauma that Indians have gone through. You don't see him empathizing with the trauma that different groups, different people had gone through. In fact, the people who actually gave India freedom were people who were traumatized or who understood trauma, but they did not get into power. And that was, I think, the chief reason why nothing really took place. I believe that if Patel was the prime minister or if Bose was the prime minister, probably a lot of it would have been very different. But people with the colonial mindsets took over after that. And that colonial mindset has ruled India ever
In
since
all
then.
fields,
In
whether
all,
it's
in
academics or it is
institutions,
bureaucracy or, yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
because it flows from the political leadership, how they want to do so, and nothing really changed. Like, for example, if I see our educational history, our education does not talk about the trauma that we have gone through, right? I remember one of my friends he's a psychologist who had come from abroad, and I had taken him to Birla Temple, and I was telling him about its history. He was surprised. He said, "But I have not read it anywhere." Then he, after I sat down, he went around. He says, "There is no board outside which tells of the history of this temple, that it was probably built after so long." He says, "Why are you denying such an important part of your history?" Why is it that it is not there part of your education? Why don't you raise children with that awareness of the trauma that they have gone through? Like in Germany, history is taught to teach German children about why there should not be a third world war, why they should not do so. If you see Jewish history is taught to the children emphasizing upon why Jews should never become the victim of a second or a third Holocaust ever, how they should survive, right? So this kind of a history which takes into account the suffering of the people, what they have actually gone through, our history does not teach us that. So therefore, as a result, our children do not grow up with that awareness of what our ancestors have gone through, right? So this, I believe, is a very important aspect. In fact, to tell you a story, I was in US a couple of just before the COVID, and I went to a temple. My host was with me, and I saw this group of Indian children sitting there. They were brought by Indian parents to help them feel rooted, as they called it. So, there was this priest, Indian Hindu priest, sitting over there teaching them Gita. I saw the children's faces completely bored, not interested at all. So then, when we came in, the priest knew. He says, "आप थोड़ा सा अब बात कर लीजिए इन बच्चों से." So I started talking. I said, "I'll not talk to you about religion. I'll talk to you about people who died for religion and what did they do." And I saw that their faces became interested. I talked about different people who gave their lives, how they fought and struggled, and I talked in a what you call children's language. And afterwards, the children said this was the most interesting session that we ever had. Why can't we get people like him more often to come and talk to us, right? Now, in all reverence to the priest, what he was talking was of a very high order, sublime, deep, but he simply could not connect with the children, right? I could do so because as a didactic psychologist, right, knowing the pedagogy, I wish that priests knew some bit of pedagogy in order to reach out to the children. I wish our priests would know that kind of pedagogy by which they can reach out to the children. So we need that kind of approach today to reach out, to educate our children and young adults about our past, about our history, and then we would notice a shift in the institution. This should have taken place at the time when the British left us.
Yeah, but why does it happen with the Jews? Why does it happen with the Armenians and it doesn't happen here? What could be the reason?
It happened with the Jews because they were driven to the, as we say, till the end of the wall. They were just pushed to the end where they realized that either we fight or we die, right? They came to the point of extermination. The same happened for Armenians, right? It probably we are reaching towards that right now because there is a threat of extermination. The theme, I see it becoming very prominent in the national discourse right now. हम खत्म हो जाएंगे. We are right now being pushed more and more, and therefore you see the nationalism also rising in India right now. So a little more towards it, if we go, then we will fully fight back and then we will give it back. That is what I see. We are going on that path right now.
Coming back to the same question, which you have explained that according to you, why things didn't change after 47. But what do you see? I mean, the one is that, please expand on it a little more, that why is it so important to face your trauma and to come out of it? And I'm again talking not at the individual level, but collectively as a society, as a nation, in the context of India. Why do you think it is so important? And how do we go about it? This is the second question.
Sure. Why it is important to face your trauma?
Because most people say it's happened in the past, अब पुरानी बात हो गई, अब उसको क्यों छेड़ते हो, let it be, that ये सब argument आते हैं, you know.
Sure. We need to learn sometimes from other societies. as many philosophers, many psychologists, many scholars have said, the past is not past. We cannot forget. We never forget. Did we forget Ram Janmabhoomi? For 500 years we carried on, right? Trauma is never forgotten. It resides in your brain. It alters, changes your gene expression. So if you say, let it be, let bygones be bygones, these are statements, right? But this is not something which is, this is never the reality that you will find. So, trauma is something that resides in us, in our bodies, in our collective, and it waits till it finds a time when you feel safe again to express it, right? Whether at an individual level or whether at a collective level, a society looks for a time when it feels safe, and then the trauma starts coming up again, right? Like in 2014, there was a sense of safety that came about. People began to feel very threatened, right? And because there was a new level of safety that started coming about, all the past issues about what we have gone through, it started coming up. It is a mere coincidence that social media also became active at the same time. But if you see, with social media becoming active, it has not happened so much in other countries like it has happened in India. In India right now, there is a deep intrigue about what happened in our past, what happened to our roots, right? The history that we taught, it was full of lies, it was not true. So there is a deep interest in wanting to go back to the past. And this has happened because of a certain rupture that has taken place in society. I call 2014 the year of rupture. you know Ruptures take place in society. A rupture is like a crack, it's like a tectonic shift. When it takes place in earth, there is an earthquake, like it happened in 9/11 in USA. The question on everybody's mind was that, why does the world hate us? Americans thought that the entire world is grateful to them for what they are doing, and it suddenly struck them that, hey, the world does not. The world hates us. Why does the world hate us so much, right? So there was a tectonic shift that took place, and it created a massive going back into the roots of what does it mean to be an American. So massive events in society, particularly of the kind of which is 9/11 or other national calamities or events, very often bring up the identity of the society again in question. So we start reinventing ourselves. And such a tectonic shift took place in 2014 with the change of government, which represented a completely different mode of thinking, a completely different mode of thought process that came about. First time we saw a prime minister who lies and does Sashtang Dandavat Pranam in a temple. No prime minister did that. He was someone who was very open about reclaiming his Hindu identity. So the society as a whole also took the cue and started reclaiming their identity, their heritage. This did not happen in 1947. What the prime minister at that time did was that he only carried on the legacy of the British. He did not try to change that and say that I would like to reclaim our heritage that we had lost. I studied discovery of India. The most important quality about that book is that it doesn't seem to be written by an Indian. It seems to be written by a Britisher, a British historian, completely detached from Indian ethos and Indian roots.
You can, of course, about Nehru, that not many will dispute what you are saying.
Sure.
But no, we've had, of course, very short period, Shastri ji, and then Vajpayee ji for 5 years. But what you are saying is you're not even mentioning them, and that's very interesting. And you're saying there's a shift, a major shift happening after 2014.
2014, yes.
So I think what I hear you say is also that even those were not that kind of shift. This is a major shift. Now, so this is a little more nuanced question that I'm trying to ask you. And
Yeah, the there were not shifts. With Vajpayee ji, however much I may admire him, but I don't think a shift took place at that time. They continued by and large in terms of our thought processes, our institutions. Nothing was changed. With Shastri ji also, Shastri ji very much was in, he was hardly there and he was very much in that mold. He was a deeply honest person, but intellectually, none of them felt like changing it. The Congress government gave the power to define what should be our education to Marxists, to Islamists, to liberal people, and it remained in their hands, right? It is only now that with the coming of Mr. Modi in power, that there is a tectonic shift which I see noticing, which is taking place in here in this field, and the education is soon going to be one of the fields that he is going to take over and change. His focus has been more on economics. He believes that you should be economically strong first before you talk about it, and I have no dispute about it. I only wish that he had taken over the education, the shift in education at a much earlier stage, like the way probably others do. Like when communists come to power, the first thing they take over is education, right? Even the AAP government in Delhi, they have taken over education and taken a hold, a control over it. Congress had a hold over it for all these years, right? The government which came in 2014, BJP, did not take hold of it. Maybe they were too defensive and scared of being attacked. That is why they did not. But I wish that they had done this, and I wish they do it now sooner than later.
Yeah, but this again, I want to pin you down on 2014. Why do you think this has happened? Is it because of Mr. Modi's background? Is does it lie in the way he has, his entire training has been? I'm not just talking of RSS, but the kind of socio-economic background that he comes from, and it's like we have a word called Lutyens Delhi, or the
I'm aware
Chor
of that.
Bagh, or what
Khan Market.
Khan Market
Khan
gang.
Market gang,
So
yeah.
he is one who's just miles and miles away
Away
from that
from
kind
that.
of a thing. I wouldn't. Probably Vajpayee ji was not that far away from that.
No, he
He
wasn't.
wasn't. So this, can we explore this a little? That is it somewhere which is causing this? It's not. I don't know. It's not Mr. Modi as such, but it is something that he brings with him, which has caused this. This is what I get as a feeling.
See, yeah, if you see Mr. Modi's personality, and I speak here as a
Yeah.
psychologist, Mr. Modi's personality is completely different in many ways from the personalities of the older prime ministers, right?
Yeah.
First of all, he is the background he comes from, the kind of, he's not ambivalent, he's not secular, and he's very much assertive about his Hindu identity, right? And yes, I would say that a major part of it comes from his personality, his background, the way he comes from, the way he stands up for it, and also that there is a very deep question in history that when a leader comes about, is it the product of the times or the product of the leader, or the leader is the product of the times, right? I know that to the best of my knowledge, this question has not been resolved so far, right? He could be a product of the times, and the times have also, they complement each other, and they have brought it up. So I believe that it is both. It is also a product of the times. The Hindu society has been very much tired and fed up of the previous, governments, particularly some of the laws that they were trying to bring about. There was a deep sense of threat of extermination. This I started feeling in 2011-12 when they were feeling that. So that was partly the reason, partly the fact that who he was at Gujarat at that time. He went and fought a very lonely battle. He was demonized like anything, for this purpose, which only made him stronger. The Indian people saw in him someone who's a savior. and the two, I think, just clicked together. He came as a savior in 2014, and that way he was both a product of the times, and the times are also being shaped by him. And today, I think the biggest thing for Hindus is the threat of extermination. The Hindus are in a survival mode right now. They have been in a denial mode so far, and they have understood that they were in a denial mode because they had to survive, and they do not want to continue like that anymore.
Yeah, but there's a large section of Hindus, at least the influential Hindus, who are part of this secular liberal politics,
Yeah.
and and they get a lot of support from.
They were the previous generation.
You don't think they are still there, very strong?
They are, because our education system has not changed
And that is a major threat, isn't it, to
very
the shift
much.
which is happening.
Sure.
So now my question to you is how you, now this is not as a psychologist so much, but how do you see this unfolding? Because at one level you say that there's a major shift which has happened since 2014, and I tend to absolutely agree with that. But on the other hand, I find this whole, the major forces working against it, and they're going all out now. And they're also getting support, let's say, from, I mean, it's not a secret anymore, from the West, whether it is BBC or it's New York Times or it is
Washington Post.
the democratic system in the US as well as in England, and perhaps also China. I mean,
Not perhaps, I believe.
So, are we able, I mean, this is very crucial. Which side can it, there are chances that they can reverse this shift which is
Very
happening.
difficult. No, I don't think that it will get reversed right now. I think it's in motion at the moment, and I think that it is unfolding itself at a much faster pace than for it to be stopped or reversed or taken it back to extinction. I don't think so. I think there is a sense of deep distrust in the people towards what they have been told, what they have been taught, and they are very much in tune with that. They are aware that, so there is that sense of distrust in the people. You cannot stop anymore by covering it up, by putting a lid over it, but it is something that you have to face it directly. That's why probably you see all the opposition leaders right now showing also their Hindu heritage. Tell me a single time in India's history when opposition leaders or even the leaders from the main political party showed their religious heritage, the Hindu heritage, so openly. It is happening right now because they realize that it's an irreversible process. It is not going. It is not going to change right now. That's what I am, something very firm. I mean, I firmly believe that.
So this new trend which is coming, I mean, this tectonic shift that you spoke of.
Tectonic.
Tectonic, yeah. This
It's become a movement.
th- this is the process towards healing, right?
Yes, it is a process towards healing.
And in that, I mean, we can point out a few things like Ram Janmabhoomi is one of the things.
Healing is to going towards the truth is a healing process. A healing process is not something that you can ever go by going against the truth, by going against what has been the reality, right? I'm reminded of that famous example by Martin Luther King when he wanted to take out a rally in a city, and the police officer came and said, everything has been fine in the city, why do you want to disturb the peace? And he said, peace is not the absence of justice. Right. So peace is not the absence of justice, and anything that takes us towards truth is healing. There is a myth that healing is something where you go away from truth. No. Going towards truth, realizing that how painful it has been, is part of the healing process only, of reconciliation process. And reconciliation is not with the other, reconciliation with yourself. So it is both with self, with my past, with myself, with what I have grown up, with the fact that I've been betrayed,
Right.
right? So I feel very angry with the way I was taught something which was so wrong, so false, whether it was the Aryan invasion or whether the fact who gave us freedom, right? I need to reconcile with myself, with the people who taught me, and forgive some of them for the fact that they were doing only what they were told. We were playing a role, but it is important to change that. So that healing and reconciliation is a process which also makes us morally, spiritually strong in order to face the truth. That is what has happened with some other societies. It has happened, I would say, with Jews. I know that to some extent it has happened with Germans, with Australians, right, who have dealt with the crimes done by their ancestor, or what they have, or what the painful things they have faced in the past, and they have moved through that to become who they are today. Yeah.
So that means I'm very happy that what you are seeing it as a there's a great hope.
Oh yes,
You
I
feel
do.
that we are in the process of
Oh
healing,
yes.
and but how long is this going to continue before it settles down?
I think it will continue for a long, long time, right? And I don't think it is even, I think we should not look at the process of settling down or settling up. It will cause a lot of turmoil. You know, coming to your past, introspecting it, seeing what happened is not easy, right? Introspection is can be a very depressing thing. But introspection is liberating,
It
right?
is a must.
It is a must because without understanding what really happened, you cannot change. So I do believe that we are in the process and it is something that is happening. And I'm not bothered about settling down or settling up because that's a kind of a fear. You know, how far do we go? No, let's face that. Let us, for example, take accountability for what happened, right? I tell Kashmiri Pundits that you need to tell Kashmiri Muslims that they, in fact, encouraged the militants, the others to run away, right? They feel very scared, right? I said, no, they did that, isn't it? Yes, they did that. So, until and unless you confront them for it, for what they did, they will not also take accountability. Expecting them to miraculously change and all that will not happen. You need to say that, hey, you were my neighbor. You were laughing when I left. You had kheer in your home when you saw my home being empty. You celebrated it, right? And I'm angry with you and I want to demand an answer as to why you did that to me, right? So the victims need to turn into survivors and demand accountability. That's what the Hindu society needs to do. So when that happens, and that happens in a powerful, significant way, we would see change happening. So the focus should not be on anything else, but telling the world what happened, telling the world that this is what we went through, this has been our history, this has been our memory, and confronting the world with that. And then we will find that people fall in line, people say, hey, because you are accepting it, because you are saying it so powerfully, we also accept it. That is what happened with Jews. You know that they were Holocaust deniers and they existed. The Jews silenced them. They had to, for example, Deborah Lipstadt, the professor who fought for the truth that concentration camp actually existed. David Irvine, the British historian, he made a case saying that there were no Holocaust did not take place. There were no incinerators. There was nothing like that. It's all a made-up story by Jews. She went and painstakingly proved that no, it happened, it existed. That kind of painstaking research, that kind of painstaking support is necessary for Hindus to also come up and bring it up, right? So once when we do that ourselves, then the world will take us seriously.
But we are in the process, we
Oh
are a
yes.
democratic country, and I find that today the entire opposition, and I'm not talking in terms of pro Modi or anti Modi kind of
Sure.
a thing, I'm just talking in the context of what we have been discussing. sometimes one fears that, of course, after Mr. Modi has come into power in 2014, certain processes have taken place and certain things are happening, and they are major happenings. And this is all
It was
part.
an earthquake.
Huh.
I
So,
believe
but
it was nothing less than that.
will it continue? I mean, in the sense, if 2024, all forces are aligned against him, and
I don't think they will be, they may be aligned against him, but I don't think that collectively they are a force who will be able to, bring about a
this is
difference.
too big a shift.
This is too big a tectonic shift. I mean, the whole of India, a large part of India, that's what I mean by whole, by and large, will again go and, vote for Mr. Modi. That's what my firm belief is.
So, all the best to you, and I'm very
Thank
happy
you.
with this interview. I hope the listeners also find it very interesting, as they enjoy it as much as I did. Very enlightening. So, thank you, Dr. Mitra.
Thank you.
मुझे लगता है आपने भी इसको इतना ही रुचि लेकर सुना होगा, और आपको भी इतना ही एनलाइटनिंग लगा होगा जितना मुझे लगा इंटरव्यू करते वक्त डॉक्टर मित्रा को। तो मैं उनको धन्यवाद देता हूं, और आपसे निवेदन है कि आप इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें, इसको लाइक करें और इसको हमको इनकरेज करें। धन्यवाद।